What comes to your mind when I tell you the word feedback? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Most likely, it's not a very pleasant thought that you're having. Feedback has been one of the most talked about, researched, and studied topic in HR in decades. Still today, it's considered as one of the most important tools for leaders and managers to have in their pocket. And yet, we look around and let's be honest, feedback is practiced very rarely and it's practiced very poorly. So what's going on? What can we do here to make feedback that actually works? Let's dive into it. Well, to figure this one out, I think we simply need to look at why feedback doesn't work. And in general, there are two scenarios. The first one, probably the more common one, is feedback turns into judgment. Too often when we give feedback, it ends up being kind of a judgment of another person, whether they did something well or not well. And who wants that? That's not very pleasant. And it doesn't work very well. We feel judged and generally we reject what we heard. And that's one very, if not the most common scenario. The other scenario, also common, is we don't really give feedback. We are too soft and we just say generalities, and frankly it's so superficial that the other person doesn't really get it. What did I do wrong? So we want to avoid both those extremes, either being too direct and judgmental or being simply too soft and too nice and not really having an impact on the other person. How do we do that? The secret to giving great feedback with zero judgment is to make the feedback not about the other person, but about you. Yes, you. What happened to you when you observed a certain event? What thoughts came up? What feelings came up? What values of yours were involved in this moment? That's all information that the other person doesn't have and that you can share with them as a gift. Very humbly. Doesn't mean that your thoughts and feelings are justified. They could come from all sorts of reasons and all sorts of sources. But at least you're sharing this information which can be useful for the other person. Let me give you an example. Let's say your colleague delivered his report 3 days after he promised. You can simply say to him or her, "Peter, when you gave me your report 3 days after you'd promised it, I got really concerned. In fact, I got really worried. Why? Because I value honoring commitments. For me and our team, honoring our commitments is something really important. So for that reason, I was feeling disappointed and worried." And that's it. That's all you're sharing. And then you can go on with the discussion. You're not here to judge. You're not here to offer advice. They can do with that information what they want. They're adults. But now they have more information about what happens to you, when certain things around you happen and you observe them. Now let's go ahead and practice this today. And there are 3 simple steps called ME, M-E-E, because it's all about me when you're giving feedback. Number 1, M stands for moment. You have to specify what moment it is that you're talking about. You're not talking about generalities. You're not judging the other person. So you're going to refer to this particular moment this morning in the meeting, yesterday when you sent me that email, and the person has the reference of what you're talking to. Number 2, you're going to talk E about the event. What happened in that moment? What did you see? What did you observe in that moment that triggered something of you? For example, something that the person said, something that they didn't say, something that they did or didn't do. You're sharing what is the event that you observed. And number 3, you're going to talk about the effect. What effect did this all have on you? What thoughts did it trigger? What emotions did it trigger? What values were involved? And why did it trigger that? Well, in this one example, because you really cared about honoring one's commitment. So you want to go a little bit deeper and share all these things that are happening or that happened with you in this one moment with this one event. Zero judgment and feedback that works. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.